Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Cobern, and today's episode, talking about the Dallas Cowboys versus New York Giants data projections. This is probably one of the first videos I'm going to do on this particular topic. We'll see how it does. But today's episode will be looking at the data matchups in the 2024 Thursday night football game between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. Some context here. This is a really important game because Dak Prescott is 12-0 against the New York Giants in his career, and the Cowboys have dominated the Giants last season by a point difference of 72 points last year. So if you add up all the points they scored and then you minus the points that they allowed, they had a 72-point difference in terms of how well they performed last year, which is ridiculous. It's very ridiculous. So the Cowboys have been spanking the Giants for a decent amount of time, especially in 2023. And also, on top of that, the Giants have also lost 8 straight games on Thursday night football. So they have consistently lost on national television on Thursday nights. Now, Thursday nights are notoriously hard for most teams to do. It's never easy to play a game on Sunday and then 4 days later you're playing another game. It's never easy to do that, but it's just part of it. Just is what it is. You got to be ready for these games. But I found some data that points towards the streak of Dak Prescott and the Giants' woes on Thursday night changing for the better. So stay tuned until the end of the video where I reveal the best statistics that really determine this particular game. We're going to look at some historical data and stuff like that. But this is going to be interesting. This is going to be very interesting. This is going to be kind of a different video than I've normally done. And if you guys love the Cowboys, again, you don't have to watch this. If you're a Giants fan, I think you'll definitely like it. I don't really have any skin in the game. Whether or not the Giants or the Cowboys win or lose, it makes no difference to me. I'm just a data analyst. So now, the context also. The data that I'm using takes a look at 44 statistical categories, including offense and defense. I'm not going to sit here and name off all 44 categories to you guys. I think most of you guys will get most of these categories, honestly, as I talk about them. But the Cowboys are on average down 30 points overall from where they were statistically last season. So if you take their statistical performances from week 1 to 3 in 2023 and you compare it to how they performed in 2024, they're down overall statistically by an on average 30 points, which is a big dip. In particular, the overall defense of the Cowboys has not performed as well as they did in 2023, while the overall offense and defense of the Giants has improved. So this is the big differences between these teams, and this is what makes this an interesting upset matchup to consider, is that the Giants are better overall from where they were last year, and the Cowboys are worse than they were last year. Now, does that necessarily mean that the Cowboys are going to lose? Not necessarily, but that is an interesting point of note that the gap is getting smaller statistically from a statistical standpoint. Now, offense versus defense. So this takes a look at the offense and the defense in terms of the difference between 2023 and 2024 for the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. I think the biggest thing you can see offensively for the Dallas Cowboys is that their rushing offense has been downhill. So they have, in terms of rushing attempts over the last 3 weeks from last year compared to this year, they're down 86 points overall, and statistical points, if you will, relative percentile points overall. Their rushing yardage over that 3 week time span is also down 80 points. So this team on the ground is not getting it done. They're not rushing the football well, which is something that is totally different from what they were last year. Now, on the flip side, the passing offense has had some improvements. I think a lot of that is to compensate for the rushing offense not really doing well, but the passing offense has improved from last season. So in terms of completions, attempts, yards, touchdowns, on the passing side, on the receiving side, they have improved in that particular area for the Dallas Cowboys. So that is the big sort of difference between the Cowboys offensively this year versus last year, is the passing offense is in many ways compensating for what the defense, not the defense, but just the rushing offense hasn't really been able to do. Moving over to the New York Giants side, the rushing offense has improved, not by a ton. Again, we're talking about 12, 17, 20 points in the positive area. Time of possession has gone up on offense, which is an improvement. Interceptions have gone down. Interceptions per play, that's what IPP stands for, is interceptions per play. Time of possession is TOP, okay? Just so you guys are following along. SPP, which is sacks per play allowed. The Cowboys have increased that tremendously. A 58-point difference between how many sacks they gave up in the first 3 weeks last season versus this season, whereas the Giants are improved in that particular area. They're giving up less sacks overall, which is a nice improvement. Third down completion percentage is also up for the Giants offense versus the Dallas Cowboys, which is a big improvement. So from the offensive standpoint, as you can clearly see, the Giants have improved overall, and the Dallas Cowboys have decreased their rushing ability, and they're giving up plays like sacks, interceptions, punting more often, time of possession, all those things are down. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact the rushing game is not really getting it done. So these are concerns. Okay, these are the big concerns for the Dallas Cowboys offense going into this game. Is those concerns right there. Now, on the flip side, defensively speaking, the Cowboys defense, statistically, in terms of their passing defense and especially their rushing defense, has been downhill. I think whatever happened against the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs has kind of carried over to 2024 in terms of their ability to stop the run. In fact, they are number one right now in terms of giving up fantasy points to running backs thus far this season. Again, it's early, but they are number one in terms of giving up rushing points fantasy-wise this year so far, based on the data that's come in so far. So that tells you the big difference between the Dallas Cowboys defense. This defense can be had. This defense is not as scary as it used to be. And again, I understand they might have the Giants as a way to kind of boost their morale, I guess is the best way to put it. But you can see that the data really skews towards the Dallas defense is not getting it done as well as they used to. The passing defense is still relatively decent, but again, the rushing defense is the biggest Achilles heel here. Now, when you get to the New York Giants difference between the defense from 2023 to 2024, you can see improvements in the passing defense. I think the rushing defense has really improved, but the big things I really like here for the Giants is that they have really improved in terms of interceptions per play. Sacks per play is up by 90 percentile points, which is really impressive. So again, they were 2 in terms of sacks per play in 2023 from a percentile standpoint. And now they are 92 in terms of that in 2024. So they are a lot better in terms of getting sacks. And keep in mind, the Cowboys are not, they're getting worse in terms of giving up sacks per play this year. And this could be, again, this could be the deciding factor. This is why I'm leaning towards picking the Giants in this particular matchup, because of the defensive differences here and the fact that the weaknesses that the Cowboys have, or what they've given up in the last 3 weeks, sack-wise, I think it's going to be exploited a little bit in this matchup. So this is going to be interesting, guys. It really is. I think the streak is over, I think, at this point. I could be wrong, but I think that the Giants have caught up to the Cowboys to a certain extent, especially on defense. And that could be a very big deciding factor in this matchup. Now, next up, overall force for the tree perspective. So you can see the categories over there, but this is the overall points per play on offense and defense combined is TSC. PO is passing offense. RO is rushing offense. AO is advanced offensive data. This is things like sacks, uh, interceptions, those types of things. Punts per play. How efficient is the offense? That's a lot of what that measures. And then on the other end is what the defense does in terms of generating sacks and punts and those types of things. Third down completion percentage as well. These things statistically do matter in terms of winning football games. But overall, you can see there's just a big difference in terms of improvement between what the Giants have done through weeks from 2023 to 2024 versus Dallas from last year. So the Dallas Cowboys are worse off than what they were last year compared to this year, whereas the Giants, are better. So this is the overall viewpoint of it, which is again is why I'm really leaning towards a Giants victory. Now, this isn't enough to really put them over the top because you have to really compare the matchups per matchup, the differences here, because you can see that comparing the Dallas Cowboys in 2024 to the New York Giants in 2024, they're still both not very great football teams overall when you look at it from a data perspective. But this just kind of shows what could happen in this particular matchup. Now, moving to historical data matchups. I know this is going to be a little bit of I don't want to say cherry picking, but I sorted the data as best as I could to find matchups that really match up the best in terms of predictions. In terms of the offense versus the defense and all that other sort of stuff. And I found four matchups in the data that really look similar to the Giants and the Dallas Cowboys, through 3 weeks into week 4. Those matchups are Atlanta versus Minnesota in week 4 of 2005. Carolina versus the Falcons in 2003, Atlanta versus the Arizona Cardinals in 2006, and then Cincinnati versus Cleveland in 2008. Now, the biggest thing I really looked for is not having the best or most productive passing offense, but having more of a run heavy offense is basically what it is. Because, again, Daniel Jones is not lighting people up. He's better. It's not as anemic as it was last season. A lot of this because of Malik Neighbors and other receiving options as well. But as you can see here, 3 of those matchups were wins, and out of 4, which were losses. So that kind of again leans me more towards a Giants victory here. Now they could still lose. Again, a 25% chance of losing is still a 25% chance of losing, but the data really, when you look at the historical data, you look at how they improved from year 1 to 2003 to 2024, and you look at this overall data right here, you can see what I'm talking about here, that it really leans towards a Giants victory here, especially when you look at it at home. It's in New York, it's not in Dallas. So that's another thing to kind of look at here. Now, matchups on the defensive side of the football. I found that you did not need to have a shutdown defense. The Bengals had a much better defense compared to the Cleveland Browns in 2008, and they lost that game. Comparatively speaking, so the defense isn't the most important factor here. But as you can see, defensively, they're in the similar range as say Atlanta and Carolina in terms of the data here for them. Moving on to the Forest perspective as well, taking a looking back at those matchups, the running game was a big factor in those victories. So if you actually go back and look at the Atlanta Minnesota game, Carolina Atlanta game, Atlanta Arizona game, it looks like a completely different world. And a lot of the data work that I did really took the data from that era into account. So I'm more so comparing the Giants to a 10-year sample, and these other teams were also compared to a 10-year sample to kind of get to these data points to see where they were in terms of the era in which they played. And from this perspective, this is kind of how it shakes out. It's 3 wins, 4 losses. So I would say this in terms of this game, and I'm just going to throw it all out there. I think that the Giants are going to win this football game. I really do. I think from a statistical standpoint, they are better this year than they were last year in defensive categories and offensive categories, especially rushing. The Cowboys' defense has been awful against the rush. And again, it's not something that couldn't improve in this particular matchup, but the Dallas Cowboys offense is just not getting it done offensively. And I think this is something where I would not be surprised if Daniel Jones rattles off a couple big gainers on the ground as well. Daniel Jones is not really known for his rushing ability, but he could have some big gainers in this game, like a 20-yard, 30-yard type run in this game, particularly in many ways. In fact, I think another thing to really hammer home on this, before I kind of end this video, is that each of the games on the list were very sloppy games on both sides of the football. So I don't expect to see pretty football here between the Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. I think there's going to be some interceptions. I think Dak might have a couple interceptions this particular game, and Daniel Jones might even have some interceptions in this game, and still win, because of the rushing game. I think that's the biggest thing. Is I think the Giants really need to establish the run, um, take time off the clock, win time of possession, really beat up on the Dallas Cowboys defense, which has been really inept, really terrible in terms of stopping the run this year and last year, as you guys remember. And I think that will really show a Giants victory. Uh, but I would predict simply this: I think the Giants will win the game on Thursday night. I think that there is a chance they're going to lose, and I think everybody's really going to side with the Dallas Cowboys. They really wanted to bounce back in this game because, as I stated before, Dak Prescott has beat the Giants 12 times in a row. He consistently wins against the Giants. I think it's just what he does. And the Giants have also been bad, and they've lost on Thursday Night Football 8 times in a row. But I think the Giants have improved enough. They have enough firepower on defense and on offense to really make a difference in this particular matchup, which is why I'm taking a Giants victory in this one. So, if you are into putting money on games and that kind of thing, I definitely would more so prefer the rushing game of this particular matchup. So, guys like Devin Singletary would be somebody to look at. And of course, again, it might be a stretch, but again, I think the Giants, statistically speaking, thus far through 3 weeks, have improved enough to close the gap, and that this could be a really good game for them. Sloppy. I think it'll be sloppy. I think most NFL teams this year have been really sloppy in terms of the games, efficiency. There's not really any world beaters this year. There's a couple, but there's not a lot of really, truly dominant, consistently dominant, teams this year. But overall, that's what I go with. I think the Giants are going to win this game. I think based on all the statistical data I just showed you, that's why. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.